Hatred outlives the hateful. Rancor, Magic the Gathering. The Daily Grind, Chapter 181. An hour flew by in a real hurry. James had dropped by their armory to grab some gear before teleporting down to some minuscule town in Utah and bailing JP out of whatever problem he had caused this time. A shield bracer, mostly charged with the shield at level 4, 20 out of its 25 charges filled, another about to tick over. The cooldowns on these technically scaled down rapidly, but the difference between 10 hours and 12 hours wasn't actually relevant in combat situations, so the Order just kept a bunch of spares and rotated them out. This one was about halfway to level 5, which would again make it faster, and yet somehow not faster enough to make a difference that a single person not on shield bracer leveling duty would ever notice. A pair of dungeon tech laser pointers, one of the mapping ones and one of the ones that broadcast your emotional state to the target. Those and a pair of the glasses that showed affiliation were his main office magical tools. Useful little tricks it was good to have on hand just in case. And one telepad, which was a very useful trick. And then more personal magic. He'd gotten another one of the blue orbs that dropped from breaking telepads and restocked his manipulate asphalt power to a full 23 uses. Ethan, who had been helping Rufus organize the armory and was helping James find stuff, had asked if he could absorb a second blue yet, and James had to admit that he didn't know. They tried on an unknown blue, but all that had happened was James had broken it when he'd pushed too hard trying to absorb it. +1 skill rank, gardening, flowers, peonies. Problem solved. Pets fed. James would need to take time later to interrogate what exactly it meant by pets. There were 4 other orbs waiting specifically for him, too. He jokingly asked Ethan if any of them would help him with how much his chest scar itched, and instantly regretted it as the early 20s kid, still puppy dog enthusiastic after all this time, scribbled a note to keep an eye out for exactly that. Ethan had changed a lot, and James hadn't really noticed because he'd been busy and also avoiding the guy. Not that he hated Ethan or anything, but Ethan reminded James a lot of Fred from the Scooby-Doo cartoons. Just so eager to take charge and solve problems in ways that were funny when they happened to a talking dog, but were a little annoying when they happened in real life. More annoying when it felt like the person causing them didn't seem to ever take failures into consideration, just being optimistic and cheerful to the point that the emotions were grating and almost meaningless. This version of Ethan was still optimistic, still energetic, and also so caught up in his ideas for solutions that he was kind of pushy about them. But he was a lot more bearable. Maybe it was because he wasn't doing it while James was trying to rescue 50+ people from a death trap. But either way, the gradual shift toward maturity was appreciated. Not that a good mood was immature, just that timing was a little important. James had to assume it was exposure to Rufus that was doing it. His first dungeon friend was doing well, judging by how he made constant little clicks as he filed stuff away in the drawers and shelves of the armory. There were a few staple plants growing in one of the corners in small pots, along with a cactus, and the Strider would occasionally pass by to poke at them with his pen legs. James had already promised to come by Rufus's garden when he got back and see what the Strider had mimed out as the good stuff, which was its own kind of exciting, but that was for when he wasn't on a time budget. Trying to backtrack his statement about his itching wounds to Ethan was of no use. James made his own mental note to be careful what jokes he made around the kid. The dude was sometimes more literal than the most isolated of Camercondas. He gave up after the second try and just caught up on his own armory package. Shell upgraded. Tensile strength, ligaments, plus 19.8 psi. Shell upgraded, throw speed, plus 8 miles per hour. Shell upgraded, vocal precision, plus or minus .4 octaves. +1 skill rank, art, painting, impressionist. +1 skill rank, animals, duck. +1 skill rank, fabrication, cookware, cast iron. +2 skill ranks, logistics, transport, large scale, France, northern. Karen had slipped that last, rather specific skill in specifically for him. James knew it. He should never have said that his puny human brain couldn't comprehend the numbers when talking about road networks in cities. Karen had taken that as a challenge, much like Ethan has taken his itching. This was entirely his fault. He had opened his mouth and someone had fixed a problem at him. The last thing he added to his person was a weapon. Grudgingly, though. He still didn't like how he felt when he had a sidearm, no matter how adroitly his hands could make it do what he needed. And he refused to waste one of the SQ gun bangles on it, particularly because of the absolute inefficiency of burning a year-long cooldown on a weapon he wasn't going to get attached to. But also partly because he got to say gun bangle repeatedly when refusing Ethan's insistence that he take it, and that word had good mouthfeel. And with that, he was about as ready as he felt like he could be to tackle whatever JP and Dave needed his help with, which was, in all probability, something existentially dangerous. Counting the semi-distraction of Ethan's insistence that he try another blue orb, James had spent about 15 minutes on this, and half of that was spent waiting for an elevator. His main time sink now was finding extra people to bring with him. Alana! James cheerfully threw himself at his girlfriend, interrupting the paperwork she was filling out in the response break room. Just the person I was looking for, also high frequency. He nodded to the camera conda on the other side of the small table, who was slumped over its surface, her camera head somehow looking mopey. That explains why you texted me 2 minutes ago asking where I was. Alana tilted back and bonked into James's chest with her head. Sup? Do you want to come to Utah with me? James asked, cupping her head in his hands and massaging her scalp through her short hair. Alana melted into him. What, for a vacation? She asked. Because you just had a vacation. Wait, you're in charge. You can take all the vacations you want. It's the perfect crime. No. James couldn't keep the grin off his face or out of his voice. It's to help JP with the people who made the depression potion. Or people linked to them or something. I'm headed out now, but I wanted some backup. Also, I'm not in charge. The noise Alana made was one that evoked an obvious disbelief, but put it off for future conversation. Well, that does sound fun, but I'm on call, and while Response makes allowances for emergencies and bailing friends out of things, I don't think that's what's happening, is it? Nah, JP says he wants me there to be an ethics person, I think. He intends to do some diplomacy, and having someone who likes talking to people without tricking or flirting with them is a good idea. Isn't Dave with him? Alana, think about that sentence. Right. Alana clicked her tongue, wiggling slightly to motivate James to keep giving her head rubs. So why backup? Because I'm tired of getting caught unprepared for disasters every time I leave the state, James said, with a blunt frustration in his voice. If someone's going to try to drop a building on me again, I want my muscly girlfriend there to punch them for me. Alana stuck her tongue out at him. Well, as much as I'd love to cover your delicate butt, you'll have to find someone else. Maybe ask her Rush. He likes you. Or Alex, because she's eager for adventure, and this absolutely will turn into a disaster for you. Alana thought for a second, looking around the room for anyone who wasn't on call with Response right now. Or you could, She cleared her throat and trailed off, just as the camera conda at her table perked up. Me! Frequency of Sunlight exclaimed in her digital voice. Me! Take me! James shrugged. Yeah, sure. Go find Alex for me. We'll meet upstairs in... The camera conda was already gone, toppling the chair in her wake as she slithered out of the room at 10 miles an hour. Alana pivoted around in her own chair to look up at James. You get that Deb is going to kill you, right? Joke's on her, she took an oath. James rolled his eyes. He had a kind of complex feeling about Deb's desire to keep her girlfriend safe. On the one hand, he got it. He himself felt like he'd do just about anything if Anesh or Alana needed it of him. But Deb had a constant insistence that frequency of sunlight not even be in situations where she might need help, and James could see with a terrible clarity where that was driving a wedge between them. Also, it was just kind of a shitty thing to do to somebody. He'd been wanting to talk to Deb about it for days now, ever since he made the realization halfway through his trip, but he hadn't found time since he got back. Maybe he'd ask Alex to bring it up. The two of them were friends. It'd probably come across better than James being the one to say anything. Okay, Alana told him. But Sunny is also my friend, so please don't get her in too much trouble, okay? Or hurt, or shot, or a building dropped on her, any of the things you said. Oh, absolutely. James blinked as he refocused on the conversation. I mean, she's new to everything. She needs a little protection, right? But she also wants to do stuff, and she's adult enough to make her own choices. And am I really the right person to tell someone not to follow their dreams of adventure? Fuck no. Alana didn't hesitate for a second to answer that. Anyway, you gonna go or are you gonna hang out with me all day? I mean, I could just hang out with you all day, sure. James plopped into the vacated Camerconda seat, sinking down into the bucket instantly. What you working on? Alana snorted out a laugh. Report on the last response deployment. Armed robbery, my least favorite thing to deal with. Really? Even less than fights over noise complaints? James was surprised. Oh, yeah. Noise complaint fights are negotiation. Armed robbery, you have to worry about a bystander getting shot or something. Alana sighed, tossing her pen back onto the plastic table. The worst part is there's an easy fix to the problem. Give the guy, it's always a guy by the way, money. But that kind of just incentivizes the wrong behavior. James tried to lean forward to plant his elbows on the table, but just found himself sucked further back into the bowl of the cushioned chair. Okay, so... He struggled forward, eventually pulling himself up with a huff. Okay, so what I'm hearing is we need to kill poverty. Again. We killed poverty once? Alana asked, deadpan. I heard it once, James said. Though I think last time I heard it, I was saying it. You were, and you were right, and it sucks, because we don't have, tax income or some massive investment portfolio we can leverage into generating help. We can't actually make social services, you know? I mean, I've heard that. But I've heard a lot of things that we can't do in my day. James affected an old man voice briefly. But yeah, I have this weird suspicion that it would be more cost-effective to run a social safety net than to actually stop people robbing banks, you know? Gas stations, Alana said. What? It's never banks. 4 months doing response. I have not stopped a bank robbery. Even once. My childhood dream of being a superhero is crumbling around me. It's gas stations, or convenience stores in gas stations. Wait, childhood dream? James smirked at her. Alana made a rude noise at him. I mean, they're still my dreams, but they were from my childhood, too. Also, hey, aren't you supposed to be somewhere? I should probably get moving, yeah. James rolled his feet to the floor and hopped up. Though I suspect JP would have called me repeatedly if there was an actual emergency, and I'm giving Alex and Sunny time to get their stuff together. James, if you don't think both of those girls have adventuring kit ready to go, possibly on their persons at all times, you're kinda dumb. I am kinda dumb, James told her, leaning down to plant a kiss on her cheek as he passed by. That's why you like me, I assume. Have fun in Utah, Alana yelled after him with a dopey grin on her face as he left the break room and headed for the stairs. James stretched his legs out on those stairs, passing by a pair of response members he didn't recognize coming back with fast food bags. He nodded politely as they passed each other on the concrete staircase. A part of him realized now that the organization was too large for him to know everyone all the time, but that was fine, he also realized. He knew some people. They knew some people. Eventually it was all one big chain. The world had always worked that way, but the modern era had tricked everyone into thinking they were separate, that their communities were too small to matter. He liked it here. He liked the order he'd started, that he was increasingly sure could keep going without him. He just walked past two random people he'd never met, and yet he knew they wanted to help. That was a powerful and comforting thought. James added a heavy coat to the light smile he was wearing when he got upstairs to the common room, and found Alex and Frequency of Sunlight waiting for him by the front desk. "Hey, you two ready?" he asked. "He kept us waiting forever," Alex complained. "It's been, like—" "It has been 7 minutes," Frequency of Sunlight said matter-of-factly. "Which is still too long. We are impatient." "Well, it's good that you're self-aware about yourselves," James said, pulling out his telepad as he sent a final on-the-way text to JP. "Hey, Frequency, with telepads, does it work for you with the mech arms?" he asked, tilting his phone in a gesture toward the robotic backpack she had wired into her skulljack. "Or are they not you?" "Not me," Frequency of Sunlight replied, shaking her whole head and upper body side to side in a motion of denial. The backpack she was wearing was the newest version that Mars and the hardware engineer team had put together. 4 manipulator arms, ball joints at the base and wrists, elbow joint in the middle. The motor was stronger than the previous versions, which meant it was heavier. The batteries were heavier too, but still didn't provide more than an hour of operational life due to the increased power draw. The whole thing was pretty impressive if you were somebody without hands who needed hands. It still couldn't outperform or even match human manipulators, though. Grip strength just couldn't measure up yet, and stress testing had found that the arms had trouble when it came to leverage. They weren't integrated into the Cameronda's body, after all, and so the straps of the backpack were a weak point that had to be taken into account. Still, being able to pick up even light objects was basically a superpower, and after having lived with Cameronda's for a while now, James would never take it for granted again. "All right," he said, laying a hand on Frequency of Sunlight's head and getting Alex to put a hand on his shoulder as he double-checked his telepad. "Let's go see what kind of mess JP made." 3 people blipped out of the common room with a snap of air compressing. Just in time for Bill to shoulder his way through a different stairwell door, the broad-shouldered man rushing into the common room out of breath and looking around frantically. "Did I miss him?" he asked, sweeping his gaze over a handful of afternoon visitors to the order. "Hey, did anyone see James?" he called out, panting and holding his hand to his chest like he was about to have a heart attack. "You just missed him," Davis said, from where he was having a conversation with Planner by the community bulletin board in the middle of the room. "We can call him if you need something." Bill sighed. "Nah," the man said dejectedly. "I just keep missing the guy every time he's in the building. I need his particular voodoo." "Ah." Davis and Planner nodded in sync with each other, the Infomorph's angular, ghostly head bobbing in the air behind the older man's shoulder. "Would you like the spell?" Davis asked. "What?" "There is an expedition planned for 15 days from now." Planner scritched the words into the air. "You are designated as low priority on the list of potential delvers due to having a family, but the climb has so far proven low risk with proper preparation. Broader distribution of utility magics to utility members is desirable." Davis noticed Bill's flat stare. "Planner means it'd be good for the guy who needs the spell for air conditioning to have the spell for air conditioning." "Oh, sure." Bill gave a rolling shrug. "I mean, yes, absolutely. Yes? Yeah, what kind of fucking idiot would I be if I said no?" "We most likely would not have hired you if that were a likely outcome," Planner scribbled, causing Davis to rub at his forehead in frustration. This was really their own fault for collectively supporting an infomorph who had been incepted in James's head of all people. "I'll put you on the list," Davis said, trying to ignore Planner. He glanced toward where James and the others had just teleported out. "Assuming we're still alive in 2 weeks," he muttered. "Why wouldn't we be?" Bill said offhandedly, not really paying attention as he pecked at his phone, texting his wife and trying to be as reassuring as possible about a potential work trip. The researcher just shook his head and waved off the thought. "Oh, just the constant worry every time somebody around here takes an adventuring party anywhere." "You will become accustomed," Planner said, in a voice like dry scroll work. 3 bodies snapped into place in the suburbs of a small town in Utah. The thing about small towns, James figured, was that no one who didn't grow up in one really understood how their suburbs worked, or rather how their suburbs felt more than how they worked. Suburbs started to happen when cities started to grow, but suburbs didn't happen all at once. They crept out from the city core like fuzzy fractal lines, branches forming and linking up as more developments painted in the blank space between the first and second waves of growth. The process started slow and accelerated over time if growth kept up, but this led to situations where a suburb's main trunk might have single-story ranch houses with creaking floorboards built 2 decades ago with 5-acre backyards, and a street and a half away you would have polished 2-story copy-pasted family homes with fresh carpet and a secret basement if you knew where to look. Some parts of the suburbs, jumping a backyard fence would lead you to another, nearly identical backyard, but other places you'd find yourself suddenly on the edge of miles of sprawling wetland. And no matter where you went, suburbs were going to be half empty, half full of people curious for anything out of the ordinary happening in their neighborhoods. James was really, really glad that JP had done the legwork of tailing their targets back to this suburban home, because he would have gotten lost after one turn and started screaming about city planning. Being able to teleport to a known site saved him a lot of headache. This suburb was one of those long tendrils stretching away from the core. Eventually it would fill in and flesh out, but for now it was selling itself as quiet and with room to grow. When he, Alex, and Frequency of Sunlight arrived, they did so in a balmy early December day. It was overcast, gray, but still warm enough that James knew his coat was going to start feeling too heavy in about 10 minutes. Around them, white-painted 2-story homes that would be described as perfect for new families by a real estate agent lined the road, about a third of them with cars in the driveway. An equal number of houses had a cactus in their front yard somewhere, and James had a brief moment where he considered seeing if he could steal one of the big orb-shaped ones for Rufus on the way out. "Oh good, you're here." JP's voice from behind them got a jolt of shock out of James, who turned to see his friend sitting in the driver's seat of a panel van labeled as a plumbing company. "I thought you'd gotten in another thing." "Thing?" James pursed his lips and cocked his head to the side as he waited to hear JP's almost certainly insulting reply, even if he did kind of know what was about to be said. "Yeah, a thing, you know. Fight to the death, daring rescue, trapped under a falling vending machine. One of those." "There it is." James nodded. "Good, good. So, how you been?" From the passenger seat, Dave leaned past to call out the open window. "He's been like this for days. Save me." "You could have left whenever you wanted." JP pushed Dave back. "Anyway, hi, welcome to the desert." James looked around. "I know a lot of these places have cacti, but you know Utah isn't all desert, right? I checked. It's got a lot of trees, actually." He paused. "Although it is almost 70 degrees out in December, so maybe I should shut the fuck up. Also, are we seriously talking about the weather? Come on, fill me in. What's happening?" Behind him, he heard Alex snicker slightly, and Frequency of Sunlight's digital voice quietly added an "I enjoy weather" to the conversation. JP just leaned on the edge of the van's window, looking down at James. "You know, teleporting into the middle of a street as a lifestyle choice you have sure decided to make," he said in a forced neutral voice. "Sure would be awkward if one of your good friends was trying to spy on someone in the area." "You said you needed me down here," James exclaimed. "Do you want my help or not?" "Oh, I do. I'm just giving you shit because I've been bored," JP said. "Okay, here's the deal." He put on his serious face and rapidly outlined what had been going on and what they'd turned up. After they'd spooked a few of the alchemists, one of them in particular had completely foregone the process of checking in with his fellows. They hadn't spoken at all, actually, for some time, even as they'd been traced back to here through a combination of physically following them and use of the tracking devices that had been planted in their car. As far as JP was aware, The occupants were not aware they were under surveillance. There were 2 other rogues in the area that JP was rotating out with, and between them all they had the house under round-the-clock watch. No one had left, though people had been arriving over the last week and a half. Through carefully planted audio bugs as well as directional microphones, they also knew the house was worryingly quiet. The alchemist was not the first person to arrive at this house, nor were they the last. "There's 3 cars in the garage, plus the other 3 in the driveway and curbside," JP said. "Some of them arrived carpooling, too, so counting the first one already there, 9 human-shaped living things in the house. 10 if you count the dog, and you should count the dog." The dog had also been silent this whole time. Well, almost the whole time. Earlier today, just before JP had asked for James to drop by, the 9th human had arrived. Like all the others, they'd been let into the house by somebody who looked perfectly normal, a smiling late-50s woman in a black dress adorned in colorful polka dots. She'd had the same dress on every time she'd answered the door, and it was always perfectly neat. And then they'd started getting snippets of conversation. "On the one hand, I'm appreciative," JP told him, "because it's literally all relevant stuff, but they do not waste words. If they're talking, it's never small talk. It's always sharing information, a relevant opinion, or making a decision." As for what they were talking about, well, the Order of Endless Rooms. There was a lot of speculation, since the alchemist who was spooked didn't have a big-picture view of things himself, and the conversation regularly lapsed into complete silence. But when they were talking, they were drawing connections, and making declarations of shared plans for dealing with contact with the Order going forward, which led to the big problem. "They're not the people who've been making potions," JP told James, his face serious. "Okay." James leaned against the side of the van, watching Alex and Frequency as the 2 of them watched down one of the streets of the T intersection, chatting together about something. "So how are they involved? Did we spook a completely different group by accident? A secret sub-conspiracy in the Alchemists Guild?" "He's gonna hate this," Dave said from the passenger seat, headphones over his ears as he listened to the silence of the audio bugs. "No," JP told James. "They are the potions." James tensed up briefly, hands clenching on his forearms before he took a deep breath and let his hands fall to his pockets. "Yeah, that makes sense," he said eventually. "Explains the not very human silence. All of them?" he asked. "Down to the dog," JP replied. James took another deep breath. A memory of falling into an endless black, of being bricked away from his own mind, crept in on him, and a shot of icy fear rooted its way into his lungs. He shoved it away, or at least he tried to ignore it. Fear was not going to help him make a good decision here. "Okay," James kept his breathing steady. "What's their thought on us?" JP and Dave didn't have the whole picture, but they had enough of it from what they'd overheard. The potion people were, in short, absolutely terrified of the Order of Endless Rooms. And really, they had good reason to be. An organized group that knew about them, had almost lost a member to them, and was most likely hostile now. That spelled bad news for their survival prospects. The potions had gone through a few potential plans, though it was hard to hear all of them clearly, so JP couldn't give a full report. But the one that had amused him, in a grim way, was that they had considered asking for amnesty from a number of organizations. Some of them were ruled out, like the World Health Organization. Some of them were still on the table, like certain government intelligence agencies. Or, hilariously, Response. They had heard of the teleporting problem solvers, but there was no connection between them and the Order, at least as far as they knew. "So what's your plan?" James asked JP. "Well, I called you," JP said. James just folded his arms again and tilted his head up to frown at his friend through the van's window. "All right, fine," JP admitted. "I've got 3 more people around to cut off their escape. Pendragon's in the back. If you say the word, we can get the fireball gun out of storage and torch the place. There are 2 more untouched potions out in the world, according to them, but these are all the people. If we get rid of them, especially the alchemist, problem solved. Dust off our hands, done by dinner. JP shrugged, like he was talking about taking out the recycling and not committing a form of genocide. But his voice was strained, and he knew what he was saying, and James could tell. If you think we need more backup, we've got more backup. Just, say the word. James suppressed a different form of fear. What? He started to say, and then cleared his throat. What's your plan, though? He asked quietly. I called you, JP said, staring through the windshield, hands drumming a staccato beat on the worn steering wheel of the used van. Really? My plan was to call you, he muttered. James got what he was saying. There had been a fear in him since he'd taken the potion that JP had brought back, the one that was supposed to cure his depression. In a twisted way, it absolutely would have done what it said on the tin. His depression certainly would have ended, and judging by the fact that the people in the house were all seemingly from a fairly mixed set of social circles, no one would have noticed. It was, to the grim part of James's brain that thought about these kind of things, almost appealing. There had been more than one time in his life where he had just wanted the exhaustion, the panic, and the hurting to end, but chose not to, in part because there were people he cared about that he didn't want to hurt along with himself. But actual antidepressants had pushed that feeling farther and farther into the background over the last few months, and the thought of consequence-free suicide now just seemed repulsive to him. And also, when faced with the end, he'd flinched. Not just flinched, he had screamed and clawed to keep out of the endless abyss, and when Anesh had reached out to help him, he had grabbed onto the lifeline so hard he imagined he could have kinked the Ethernet cable between them with his thoughts alone. But the fear hadn't gone away. In quiet moments and nightmares, the reminder that something had tried to hollow him out and take over his corpse drifted into his thoughts. A little nudge to keep in mind the fact that he now knew the world was full of out-of-context problems, and his defenses against them kind of came down to luck. It always, in James's life, seemed to come down to fear in some way. His own fears of death, of failure, of mundanity. The more he had, the more he risked with every chance he took, the more pressure he felt to just let a safe routine take over. The fears of the rest of the Order, people like Alex afraid they'd lose what they'd become part of, JP afraid of becoming something he couldn't take back, of hurting his friends and the people he thought of as family, even kids like Morgan, just afraid that his life wasn't optimized for the way society told him things were supposed to work like. And also the fears of his enemies and opponents. Those had always been too much of an influence. Frank's fear of losing his grip on power, pushing him to feed more and more people into the dungeon. Status Quo's fear of loss of normalcy, pushing them to kill children in the name of stability. The FBI's fear of losing their national identity, pushing them to start targeting the Order for disruption. And now, the fears of these people, worried that James was going to be the one swooping in out of nowhere, bringing chaos and death and an out-of-context problem along with him. James shaded his eyes against the afternoon sun and looked down the street, waving Alex and Frequency over. He quickly filled them in on the situation. They stood there, James leaning against the van, JP badly disguising his nerves in the front seat, everyone just processing the information in the middle of a small-town Utah suburb. A polished silver sedan rolled by, the grumpy-looking driver slowing to give their collective group a glare before turning into a driveway a block away down the road. A cluster of small red birds flew close to street level, flitting from one tree to another. In the distance a train horn echoed. James ignored all of these parts of the daily life of this world, pushed them aside, because he was busy thinking. When he eventually finished and spoke, his voice was tight. I'm gonna go say hi, he said, trying to force a casual grin onto his face. They did try to kill you, JP said. Through me, I should add, indirectly at least. Yep, James said. They did. And I'm gonna go say hi. It was easier to say it the second time. I'd appreciate backup for when this almost certainly goes wrong, but I don't know, this is important. JP met his eyes, nodded slowly. He was about to say something when Dave irreverently elbowed his friend. I told you, you owe me $10. Yeah, JP grumbled. All right, you two hop in. He motioned to James's original backup. We'll park across the street just in case. He rummaged around in the glove box and came up with a pair of compact pieces of hardware, clipping one to the back of his head and passing the other to Dave. Pendragon's doing us the favor of acting as our router today. You need a spare piece of hardware? He asked James. James just shook his head, tapping the skulljack braid that he kept in most of the time anyway these days. With a slight mental nudge, he accessed local Wi-Fi, found one labeled #DragonThings, and connected to it. A small program running on the firmware of the link finding the other skulljack connections and starting to easily feed him the ability to access shared audio and visual inputs from his allies without accidentally forming a hive mind. Just in case. I like this plan, Frequency of Sunlight said, rising up to her full height in front of James, delivering a parting word before hauling herself up into the van. But I am biased. She bobbed her head in a satisfied nod. James' smile got a little bit more real. Yeah, I can imagine, he said. Well, we'll see how it goes. He and Alex had to help the Camerconda up over the final edge of the van's rear compartment, into the larger-than-expected space next to a napping Pendragon. Remember, if it turns out I'm an idiot and diplomacy was a mistake, you come save my ass, okay? He said, getting a snort and a thumbs up from Alex before he closed the back door with a metal bang, thumping twice on the doors with the palm of his hand before turning to walk down the sidewalk, like this was something he did every day. They'd tried to kill him. At the very least, the alchemist among their number was likely responsible for the propagation of more of these potions, the ones that killed people from the inside and replaced them. The kind of potion James had thought would help him. They had broken his trust, almost killed him, and as soon as they were threatened, they started trying to decide if they should sell their services to murderous intelligence agencies and world governments. James was finding it challenging to find sympathy for them, though. In fact, he was finding it difficult to feel anything that wasn't anger and that lurking, residual background fear. He paused at the end of the driveway for the perfectly normal-looking suburban home. 2 stories, really wide, few weird peaks in the roof marking alcoves in the bedrooms, nice 3-car garage. The garden was even kept up, with a kind of lawn that James scowled at for a different reason entirely. Lush greenery that was a tremendous waste of water. But he wasn't here to be annoyed at lawns. The thing of it was, James had an idea of what a working justice system should look like and should behave like. Violence, historically, didn't work. It hadn't worked, and wasn't working, to actually reduce the real problem. Because the real problem wasn't that people weren't obeying the state. The real problem was that people were getting hurt. Punitive measures didn't really do a damn thing to undo hurt, or to ensure it didn't happen again. It was counterintuitive to humans, maybe for all life, because it felt good to see someone be punished for hurting you. But that feeling was a lie and a trap. You would never reduce the world's pain by causing more of it. And if James wanted to argue for restorative justice and for an end to the cycle of harm, then he needed to live that way himself. So he followed some advice from his ongoing therapy, and looked at his anger and his fear, and he acknowledged them. His feelings were real, and they weren't illusions. He'd been attacked when he should have felt safest, and no one thing would ever take that breach of trust away. But it wasn't his goal to slap a revenge band-aid over his inner demons. It was his goal to make sure no one had to feel like this again. James took one last deep breath, filling his lungs with the smell of gradually heating dust and a slight spicy scent that he knew was from something green but he had never smelled before. Then he walked up the small pebbled concrete path and knocked on the thick wood front door. The wait was long enough he started to feel that awkward sensation where he wondered if he should knock again, which was itself a boon because the realization that he was mentally puzzling over social anxiety while waiting to meet his attempted murderers actually made him laugh a little to himself at the absurdity. When the door swung open and a woman in a black polka dot dress greeted him with a perfectly normal, slightly confused but still friendly, "Yes, can I help you?" James had an actual smile on. A bit fragile, but a real one. "Hello," he said. "My name is James Lyle. I'm here to clear up some confusion." The woman's eyes flicked up to the van at the end of the driveway, still bearing the decal from JP's fake plumbing company. "I'm sorry, we don't need—" "Okay, sorry, I should have been less cryptic." James held up a hand, forestalling her comment. "I know what you are because I have survived one of you. I am a representative of the Order of Endless Rooms. I am not here to fight, and I'd actually rather like to talk, but I can give you a minute if you need it." The woman's face had gone from worried to shock white as James had spoken, but by the time he finished, she stood with her back straight, somehow looking very small as she stared down at James on the front steps of the vantage point of the house's lobby. From inside the house there was the sound of sudden, frantic movement. James caught sight of two people bolting past the hallway, the interior door to the garage slamming open in the wake of their passing. And maybe it was seeing it in person, but there was something about her expression and the unfolding chaos that really did bring some context to this. They were afraid of him. "Is this a bad time?" James asked, holding back a full-on explosion of laughter, as his own fear evaporated